Welcome to LinkedIn Live with Insight. I'm Michelle Rowe, coming to you live from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm going to be your host today for today's discussion of anywhere operations. This notion of anywhere operations, or the everywhere enterprise, as Gardner refers to it, is really top of mind for business leaders today because it's clear now that we're not returning to our pre-COVID days of working. Companies are now a lot more accepting of remote workers and really see the benefit of a greater talent pool now that we have this incredible remote resource available to us. No longer are we anchored by a place of work. People are moving all about the country. And a year ago, as we all know, almost every single business had to contend with this, right? It was an almost overnight shift to work from home. And while most have really done a good job of making it work, I think we can all agree that it takes a little bit more than handing our employees a laptop and wishing them good luck. We have to make sure that we are working to keep the business secure, productive, and strong. And there has to be more of a comprehensive and sustainable strategy when looking at remote work. So today I have a terrific panel with me, and they are going to explain what business leaders really need to do in order to ensure that anywhere work actually works. Ian Murray is here from Insight's Connected Workforce Practice. And he's really going to explain to us how to provide IT support to remote teams. We also have Dean Gross. Dean is here from our Cloud and Data Center Transformation team, and he is going to share best practices around securing the borderless business. And finally, we have Michelle Sneed, and she is an expert on organizational change management, and she is going to help us to really look at tactical ways to help teammates and especially leadership to thrive in a digital environment. So welcome everyone. Excited to have you here with us today. And a huge welcome to all of you who are watching us. Now, if you have any questions today during this conversation, go ahead, leave a comment, and we are going to try to answer them as we go. So keeping that in mind, if you see me look that way, that's where the chat is, and I'll be looking for your questions as we go through this conversation. So let's first off start by talking about supporting remote workers. We put out a poll last week and we asked people, do you know what anywhere operations really means? Now, the results of the poll showed that there's a little bit of iffiness out there, right? Some do, some aren't really necessarily completely sure. So Ian, I want to start with you. Can you first, because of these results from the poll, start us off by really clarifying what we mean when we say anywhere operations?
Thanks, Michelle. Welcome everybody on LinkedIn. Anywhere operations, great title. I think there is a hint, at least, in that title, right? And it really is truly the ability to work from anywhere. Most organizations have a mix of knowledge workers and actual frontline staff. Obviously, anywhere work doesn't apply to everybody, but when we look at the knowledge workers, we've been untethered from the office. It was already happening. It's been happening for a long time with the prevalence of smartphones going into people's pockets. We check email when we're watching the kids' soccer game, right? We're sitting on the couch watching Netflix, making sure that we're caught up with things. So the work day doesn't really apply anymore. And the work location definitely no longer applies. And as you hinted at, Michelle, COVID changed the workplace forever. The rapid mobilization, literally people taking their desktop home with them and connecting to their home internet and working from there. CIO has been saying for years, it can't be done. It can't be done. People won't be productive. Well, guess what? The economy is growing like never before. It's happening and people are making the most of it. So we now do truly have that ability to work from anywhere at times and places that suit us, whether it's at home, a coffee shop, socially distanced, obviously, or wherever we choose to work. That's really what we mean by anywhere operations.
Awesome. Thank you. And so let's talk about this for a minute. So with the shift to remote work that you were just talking about, and really that increased zero-touch digital service, right? That's really what was happening in 2020. Mm-hmm. So it seems like a lot of organizations are already executing that anywhere operations model, like you just said, right? We had to do that. Everybody just automatically sort of, or where we could, had to shift into that. So why are analyst firms like Gartner now listing this as really a strategic trend in 2021?
Right, perfect. So many organizations in March last year, when COVID obviously was determined to be a game changer for how people live their lives, frankly. Many organizations responded with a reaction, which was, we don't have a choice. We need to get people out of the office, so let's just do it. And they did. It wasn't planned, it wasn't strategic. They didn't have the support structures in place to support those employees that no longer have access to a desk side tech that can walk up to them and solve their problem same day. So really now organizations are planning on returning to the office, at least partial. They know that the workforce is going to be distributed for the future, right? Some people are itching to get back into an office. Other people, I think I saw a poll that said 34% of people said if they're forced to go back into an office, they're going to resign. They just don't want to go back, right? So now we've got a plan for the new reality. We need to figure out how to support those users that are working from anywhere, that may not be going into an office maybe ever again, or certainly not more than a day or two a week. They still need IT support. They need access to the support to remain productive. And maybe the IT that they took home with them from the office, maybe it isn't optimal for their work situation. They're working on a kitchen table with suboptimal broadband connections, for example, right? They don't necessarily have a dedicated place to work. Organizations can't plan support around that. So this is why there is this paradigm shift into, okay, this is here to stay. How do we now support these people so they can remain productive and just be functional and connected and be productive in doing their jobs?
So, and what you're talking about right now really is looking at that sustainable anywhere operations, right? Absolutely. You're talking about maintaining productivity, making sure that no matter, what we choose when the world does start returning back to pre-COVID in some way, that we need to make sure that that's truly sustainable. So how does IT support change, right? How does it change in this new hybrid workplace?
So Insight's listen to our customers. We work a lot with our customers and try and respond to their needs. But rather than just do random one-offs, we want to have a cohesive plan that really is truly well thought out and provides a very cost-effective way to provide the support on an as-needed, where-needed basis. So we came up with 4 elements that all work fantastically together. But it can also be, thank you for the slides, but it can also be done on an ad hoc basis so we can meet the customers where they are to provide this support. And there are really these 4 key areas that you see on the right-hand side of the screen on the slide that's being shown. So we start off with service desk. So Insight provides service desk. We support 2 million service desk incidents and requests every year for our customers. And we provide access to a service tech agent via chat, via traditional phone calls, via email, or however organizations are best able to communicate with that level 1 service desk engineer. From there, we have what we've called Tech Hub. Tech Hub is direct access to a level 2 engineer that can go deeper, can run diagnostics, can run remote PC takeover tools to really find out what's going on and ideally solve the customer's issue directly. Sometimes though, we're going to find that it is actually a hardware fault, right? Maybe the camera isn't working, maybe the computer's rebooting 7 times every day. It's not sustainable, it's a hardware issue. Our level 2 techs within Tech Hub can diagnose those faults, and where customers are using us for their inventory management or buying computers through us, we're able to offer an advanced exchange program. What that means is that once we diagnose that there is a hardware fault with the user's computer, we can ship that user a new device. It can be imaged for them using managed endpoint. I'll come to that in a second. But we can ship that user a device. They get the new one. We support them to get it up and running. Then they put the broken machine into the box in which it was shipped and mail it back to us. So that's why we call it the advanced exchange, as in you get the replacement device before you should send in the broken one. We have options for delivering it too that I'll get into in just a second. And then lastly, our managed endpoint offering is taking advantage of the modern provisioning techniques. So whether that's using Intune and Autopilot, maybe it's a Mac shop and they're using Jamf, it could be VMware, it could be Citrix. We can configure and control the deployment of the new environment to the PC really through over-the-air provisioning of the device. So we can set up that end user's new replacement device and image it so it has the applications and the corporate image already burned into it when the user takes it out of the box.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. So I want to shift a little bit and I want to talk about the end user. So let's talk about the employee.
Right.
So it used to be, right, you'd show up, you were a new employee, you'd walk in, there'd be this laptop on your desk, fully provisioned, right, totally ready to go. And then if you had a problem, you would call IT. They would come over, they would help you with it, right? And obviously, this is really, really different now. It has changed significantly in this remote environment. So I'm sure a lot of people out there have probably experienced some pain points over the last year, right? With IT support being, and I don't even want to say out of reach, it's just more seemingly out of reach, right? Because they're not right there. So the question is really, how do organizations address this moving forward? So how can we do this in a way that is economical, right? We want to make sure that we're focused on that, but also really provides a better experience for the employees.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle. So the way that we're approaching those 4 services that I just quickly ran through can be delivered in a variety of different ways. We can do it virtually over the network, right? Or over the employee's home internet access so that we can run those remote diagnostic tools. We can find out what's really going on with the end user. That's going to work for a lot of users. But as we think about this long-term sustainability, organizations will still have office presence. Key employees will return. Maybe there's a hotel policy that's implemented where employees go in 2-3 days a week and it revolves so you don't have too many people in the office at one time. So there is still a need for that on-site presence, not desk-side IT support anymore. I think the whole need for that has changed. So the 4 different offerings I just went through, they can be delivered remotely, virtually, using remote conferencing, remote takeover tools. Or we plan on having Tech Hub, our level 2 support, available in our customers' offices. So imagine you go into the Apple store, there's a Genius bar, right? You make an appointment, you show up, the tech takes a look at your computer and you leave happy. That's what we're replicating. So our Tech Hub approach will be on-site, and it will also be delivered remotely. One of our customers decided they didn't want their users to have to go through service desk in order to get to a tech that could really solve their problem. So they chose to have an appointment scheduling set up where the end user could directly schedule an appointment with a Tech Hub resource where it could, again, be delivered virtually or physically in person through a walk-up. So we have that model available, right? So either we go through service desk and Tech Hub becomes an escalation of a service desk ticket, or some customers will choose to go directly, and that's great. That's a wonderful white glove experience for that end user, that they have an issue, they get their issue resolved same or next day. So we're providing a variety of different ways of delivering these services, anticipating what new normal might look like, right? I think it's pretty clear. All employees aren't going back to the office, but some will. So we want to be able, again, to meet customers where their needs are so that we can provide the very best level of IT support and keep those users productive with whatever their IT support issues might be.
So now we're talking about all of these incredible resources that we have available and things that we can help with in terms of Tech Hub that you were talking about and doing things remotely. But what are we really looking at when IT issues can't be solved in that way?
So that's where the Advanced Exchange program really comes in, right? So we don't want employees to struggle with a non-functioning device that's stopping them from being productive. So that's where that Advanced Exchange model, especially when coupled with managed endpoint for that device imaging and overall management, which can be app deployment, patching, operating system upgrades. So those 2 add-on elements really do solve that problem, so that if you've got a broken machine out in the field, let's replace the employee's machine, get them something they can be productive on. We'll ship the old one back. We'll repair it, refurbish it, or dispose of it with a secure disposal if that's what's required, right? And we do a certificate of destruction of the data that's on that device. So we do full end-to-end lifecycle management for all kinds of IT devices, whether it's a traditional Windows PC, maybe it's a Mac, That's what I use. I love my Mac. Whether it's a tablet, whether it's a smartphone, it doesn't matter to us. We have full lifecycle management, full comprehensive IT support, regardless of the employee's chosen device or form factor.
That's awesome. Ian, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I love in the beginning when you said, we've been told that we can't do this, and you just showed how we absolutely can for pretty much anything that comes our way. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I now want to invite Dean Gross to the virtual stage. Is an identity and security architect here at Insight. And Dean really specializes in helping clients find cost-effective security solutions. So he's also really focused, though, on making sure that we're creating user-friendly environments. So welcome, Dean. It is great to have you here with us. Now, we know that the dispersed workforce really creates a lot of security challenges for IT. And some of us on this call have probably experienced some of those. We've also heard about those. So it's definitely something that's prevalent and something that we're hearing about. And now we're sitting here talking about really decentralizing entire business operations. So how do you really keep your company secure when the business is literally, and I'm using that word in the way it's supposed to, running everywhere?
Well, one thing we need to keep in mind is now that everybody's out and about and working from everywhere, some of those traditional security tools that our IT departments depended upon don't work anymore. We're outside of those boundaries in the on-premises world. So you really need to focus on everybody's identity and ensuring that the identity is kept secure and that it doesn't get compromised. Because when the attackers take over somebody's identity, pretend to be them, get access to their password, all bets are off. All of the other security tools become pretty much useless. So focusing on identity is always the first priority. You can do a whole lot of other things, but if you don't have a good security program around your identities and confidence that they haven't been compromised, then a lot of your other work is just a waste of money. Once we get the identities secured, we want to make sure that the devices themselves are secured and that they're properly configured. My colleague Ian was just talking about some of the things that his group offers, but there's a lot of things that individuals can do with their home computers or that companies can do with the phones and the laptops and desktops that all of their workers have to, make it a lot harder for the attackers. The attackers are going to go after the easy things. They're in it to succeed. They're not picking on individual people. They're looking for people that are easy to attack. So making the machines properly configured is an important thing to do. Another important thing to look at is the applications on the machines to make sure that they're properly patched and up to date. There's a lot of old software out there. Vulnerabilities have been identified in that software. If those vulnerabilities have been identified, the attackers know about those and they will take advantage of them. So the thing that you want to do is to install those security patches for the different products that are on the machines, whether it's Word or Excel or Adobe Acrobat or Flash or whatever. It could be a photo editing app. Everybody has dozens and dozens of applications on their machines, and keeping those patched is super important. Another thing that you want to look at is protecting the data, the actual files that people are working on, and what happens if that file leaves your control and it gets sent to another system, another person, and how do you ensure that that is still protected the way that it needs to be? There's a lot of technologies available to do that. Some of them are complicated, but a lot of them are pretty simple. It can be as simple as clicking on a little button in Microsoft Excel and saying that this is sensitive information so that when it gets sent to somebody else, they can work with it, but they can't forward it to another person. It doesn't have to be a big complicated thing, and it shouldn't be. Another thing that we need to focus on when we're talking about security is monitoring the systems. A lot of times the attackers, they've gotten in somehow and they're just browsing around looking for names of people, and they could be in the systems for months and months and months. There's a lot of evidence that the attackers spend a long time in organizations, and sometimes they're doing things that should have been noticed, but no one was paying any attention. If you come home and a glass has been moved around in your cabinet and you're like, that's not where it was supposed to be. Somebody's
Right.
been here. You got that feeling, but that's just because you know that someone was there. It's the same thing with computer systems, but somebody has to be paying attention. Everything gets logged for the most part, but if people aren't looking at the logs and responding to them because they're busy doing other things, typically they got a new job assignment, no one told them that they needed to do it. I mean, everyone's stressed out over all kinds of stuff. It's easy to miss that kind of stuff, but companies need to make a commitment to figuring out how to take advantage of those signals and not ignore them just because, oh, no one's going to attack us. Well, that's not true. The attackers are going to go after everybody. You don't have to be a big, fancy, rich company. You could be a dentist office, a real estate office, a car sales company, or a big Fortune 500 company. It
Right.
doesn't really matter. The attackers are looking to get some money from somebody, and if they can get $100 from somebody or $1,000 from somebody, they're going to go for it. And then there's one other big thing that a lot of companies don't do, and that's to plan for the bad day, plan for a breach. What are you going to do when the bad news happens? Have you already thought about it? Who are you going to call? Who are you going to talk to at your bank? Who are you going to talk to at your insurance company? Who are you going to talk to at your legal company? How are you going to get in touch with the other people in your organization if you can't log in? You have everybody's spare phone numbers, all of that type of stuff. If you think about it ahead of time, when the bad thing does happen, it's not quite as stressful because you can pull out
Right.
your stack of paper, and it needs to be a stack of paper because you might not be able to log in to read the instruction file that's on your system somewhere. So having some printed notes somewhere to think some of that stuff through is going to make it a stressful situation a little bit less stressful. I mean, it's not going to make the stress go away, but at least you'll have something in place. And you should have practiced that a little bit also to say, okay, if I can't get in touch with so-and-so, who am I going to get in touch with? If this does happen on Saturday morning when I thought I was going to have a nice weekend off, what are we
Right.
going to do? I can't call the bank. They're not there. And I want to stop the payment for whatever, having a plan B, C, and D, at least thought through. It's something that a lot of companies haven't spent much time with. And, spending an afternoon working through that could be time very well spent.
Absolutely. Very, very good point. Dean, before we move on to the next question, I do just want to remind all of you that are watching, please feel free to chat in questions. We have a great panel and they are happy to answer those. All right, so we're just talking about really all of the ways that we need to make sure that we're looking at security and really planning for those things. And just recently, Insight published a new security report in partnership with IDG. So now everybody, we're going to drop the link to that report in the comments so you can see that. And this survey asked CIOs, CISOs, CTOs, IT security directors, and they really asked, how are you addressing cybersecurity challenges as they come up? Because as Dean was just talking about, these things are happening, right? And organizations have essentially been just kind of patching these security gaps since the initial move, right, to remote work a year ago. So Dean, can you just give us a little bit of what the survey found?
It found that even though a lot of companies have spent a lot of money over the last few years, in many cases, they are still very nervous and not confident that they have really increased their security as much as they would have liked to. It's a complex world. The attackers are getting better and better. And I think a lot of IT leaders don't think that they're ahead of the game. I think they feel like they're barely keeping their head up. They're treading water at best and going under occasionally. They see a lot of horrific news across the world in the media from other organizations getting attacked, large amounts of money, companies getting put out of business. So there's a lot of bad news there that makes everybody very concerned, and rightfully so. I mean, they can increase their defenses, but I think that one of the things that many IT leaders are regretting is buying a whole bunch of tools because they heard about some certain type of attack, and a vendor came in and said, hey, I've got the solution for that, and they bought it, and they did that 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 times. Now they've got all of these different things, and it's too much. They've overwhelmed themselves with goodies and gadgets, and they're having second thoughts. Is something that a lot of people are expressing that in that survey.
So that brings up a really important point, and it's really stressful, because what I'm hearing you say is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're basically saying that companies are really spending more on security, right? We're spending more, but that additional spend isn't necessarily making things better. So how do we explain that?
Well, I think the easiest way to explain it is that by adding additional tools makes things more complex, and complex doesn't mean secure.
Okay.
So simplifying things in many cases is going to help ensure security. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, is keeping an eye on things. How does a team monitor dozens and dozens of different tools? There's some ways to try and do that, but those systems that pull together the signals from dozens and dozens of tools, there's always some issues there. There's a bunch of cost associated with configuring it and training people, and I think that many organizations would be better served to try to simplify their internal operations so that they can focus on things a little bit better. Keeping focused on numerous different systems from numerous different companies, it's tough. And
Right.
The whole, I'm going to get the best of this, the best of that, the best of, if you think about it from like in your kitchen, if you've got the best knives and the best bowls and the best oven, but some of that stuff doesn't fit in the dishwasher, it's more difficult. You end up having to wash things by hand because it's
right.
You didn't think all of it through, and it doesn't all work together. And understanding how to organize all of the different aspects of a security program into a coherent whole program is important. And I think some organizations sort of get caught up in like whack-a-mole. It's like, oh, we're subject to this attack, or I read about this, or I heard about that. I got to go fix this thing, instead of taking a step back and saying, no, I need to protect my identities, or I need to protect my machines, or I need to decrease the number of alerts so that my analysts stop quitting on me. And, looking at things from the bigger picture and understanding, what risks the organizations are really being exposed to, and prioritizing those risks is a helpful approach for a lot of organizations, because it's easy to spend money on something that might not be a good investment or really reduce your overall risk. So we like to try and help people understand what their risks are, and whether those are financial risks or compliance risks or security risks. There's different ways to look at the risk, and how that all different companies are going to be concerned about different things. So there's not one answer for everybody.
Right.
There's some things that are common, but the probability of something, the financial consequences of it, what's it really going to mean for the business operations, are all go into the risk discussion, and helping people to prioritize that, instead of just buying a tool because it's going to stop the bad guys and make a nice little blinky light turn on the security operations dashboard. Is
right. Right. And so really it's looking at organizations and saying, okay, you have all of those security bases covered, but you're not letting all of these security solutions kind of spiral out of control, right?
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Absolutely. All right. Dean, thank you so much for your insights. Really appreciate that. I am now going to shift the conversation over to that organizational change management we were talking about and culture. So I now want to introduce Michelle Sneed. And this is a little less technical, but it's equally important, right? So if we're looking at anywhere operations and we're looking at the strategy, we really, really have to look at organization change, right? And organization change management. So Michelle is doing this. She is helping clients every single day to improve the employee experience. So this is everything from remote training, leadership, running effective virtual meetings, and really increasing our digital dexterity across the entire organization. So Michelle, having said all of that, and especially with the work that my team does, that's a lot. I don't even know where to start. So I have a feeling that's maybe where some of our audience members are feeling, right? This is a big piece of this.
Absolutely. And I think, we're living in a world that changed overnight for many of us, right? Working from an office to kind of working from your kitchen table. I currently work in my sunroom where I'm, shielded from the rest of my family. And then we had that element, right? Most of us were forced to work in a home with barking dogs, children who were also streaming because they were in school while we were all working from home. And I think the lesson that we have learned, certainly as we're moving forward, is certainly there's a lot of patience, right? People have patience, which I think is great from a human nature perspective. We laugh at the barking dog. We know that there could be kids that show up behind you on the video. But I think overall what we're seeing is that we have to figure out how we're going to kind of replace some of those interactions that we used to see in the workforce, right? It's the water cooler talk, the sitting at a table and truly collaborating, the whiteboarding. And so for us, it really is about looking at that strategy and figuring out how an organization kind of does their business. If you're somebody that's designing products, how do you get that same level of, interaction and collaboration? Well, it's about technology and it's about kind of engineering the process for how you work. And that really is where we're helping people. So for everything that had a collaborative moment in person, we have to figure that out, whether it be downtime, right? Working in cohorts. We're seeing a lot of small groups spinning off of much larger groups. It's easier for, people to take a small piece of work, get that, kind of completed, and then come back together and work with other teams to kind of build a whole process or product. It is also about making sure we're using the right technology. We all had to become Zoom experts overnight. Many of us now Teams experts. And it's about leveraging that technology to its fullest capability. I think that I had a personal journey through all of this, was not necessarily the best Teams user. And now know, because there's so many more meetings, more emails, more communications, because people want you to feel included, that it can be overwhelming. So again, I think it really is that we're focusing on, kind of taking what we used to know and moving that into what I refer as our next normal, because our next normal is here. And many of us will work remote and many of us will work in an office, and we have to figure out the best collaborative techniques.
Absolutely. So I mentioned digital dexterity, right? And this is something that we're seeing mentioned a lot, right? Gartner's talking about it. Analysts are talking about it. So how do you define this? And why do you think this is really an important piece of something to address?
So digital dexterity, kind of from my view of the world, is the ability to adapt to a technology and use it in a way that is meaningful to your job. I mean, there's lots of tools out there that may not have meaning, but the intent is that we have to learn quickly, we have to adapt quickly, and quite frankly, we need to simulate kind of what we used to do in a live environment. And so for me, it's not just dexterity, it's also agility. When you're customer facing, like many of us are at Insight, and I'm sure many of our attendees are as well, you have to learn their tools as well. And so it's being adept to kind of take that back. It's making sure that you're building, a work practice that follows Zoom and Teams and WebEx or any type of tool, so that, quite frankly, you can be productive. As I mentioned, I think what we're finding is there's lots of value in technology. It's really important. I think a lot of organizations got away from training your office productivity tools because it was just something that you should know. You came to the job knowing how to do that. It is so important right now that we are making sure that people know how to use, as I mentioned before, all of the functionality of Teams, not just pieces and parts. And that is a critical component. So we're seeing more training. We're seeing things like tips and traps, lunch and learns, really helping our customers as well as us internally, demonstrate that dexterity, that we can take what's being offered to us and driving business value. It's not tools for the sake of tools. It's how we're actually going to get our job done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, taking this to with a remote or really that hybrid, right? We've talked about how it's going to truly become a hybrid, some in person, some remote. Certainly the responsibilities for IT departments, it's going to change, right? But it's also a very different world for leaders. It's become very, very different in terms of how we engage and how we do that. So when you have workers that are virtual, they're in different cities, and then you have people that are in person, how do managers really balance that team dynamic? Or how can or should technology fit in here?
Absolutely. And I think what we're going to find is that there's not going to be any two companies that are going to be the same, right? We're going to have a different workforce no matter what type of business you are, whether you're going to be, in person, remote. And so I think what we have to figure out and where we see both technology and kind of the new role of the manager coming into play is that we need to focus on outcomes of our, collective businesses, not necessarily hours of the day. Ian mentioned, right? There's no longer work hours. We're not bounded by hours, but at the same time, it's really going to be a manager's responsibility to hold people accountable, right? There needs to be fairness. So, you need to offer the same level of flexibility for somebody who's in the office as the person who is, working from their home office. There's more touch points. There needs to be feedback loops. We need to understand what tools do people actually need. Where are they having challenges? I think it's about transparency. I think you'll also see from a technology perspective, more social networks kind of coming into play. I know that, there's a lot of kind of special interest groups. And I know even Insight in the last year, lots of breakout groups. And truthfully, have been finding that working in different spaces and doing different things with different groups has truly kind of made me feel more connected, probably more so than if I was in an office, because there is, a corporate scenario versus, being in a local office, et cetera. And so the manager's role is really going to be, regardless of where your place of work is, making sure that there is a standard way that we're engaging and working together and clearly communicating how that's going to work, and the best technology. The other piece is I think we need to listen more to what people need. Technology is not just software, right? It's hardware, it's different things. And working, outside of an office, working outside of the walls of IT, there needs to be a bit more collaboration on, what is that best setup to make sure that we're successful. So I do believe the manager plays a key role. So if you're a manager and, your role seemed quite a bit, it's going to change a bit too. And that's really what we're trying to help our customers with. How do we prepare managers, leaders, employees in lots of different scenarios, build that change management strategy so that we engineer the right work process, we understand how we're all going to engage, what are the rules of the game. And I think you'll find too that, there's a lot more preparation. It takes a bit more time to prepare. And we have to be cognizant of that, right? If you want the right outcome, got to prepare. So I do think our world will shift, but I do think with communication, the right tools, training, thinking about things differently, but at the same time, focusing on how you used to do it successfully and maybe tweaking, using technology to drive those ways of working is really the key.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I love this too because you've got me thinking about a lot of different things that we can talk through. So I love that. Now, I did have a question come through for you, Michelle. I wanted to ask you that. It said, I learned some time ago to align strategy with compensation and compensation architectures. How many companies do you think have or have not embraced home office as a frame-breaking reality and have adopted their compensation models accordingly?
So I did, I have some data that says that prior to COVID, there were probably 65 to 75% of, kind of the major organizations, Fortune, 500, who had a work from home strategy.
Right.
The trending shows that, certainly COVID is going to increase that. And so while I don't have specifics on compensation model, you do hear a lot of trending, right? That working from home may be a way to attract workers at, lower salaries or different types of kind of compensation requirements, right? They want more time to work different shifts or different hours. And so I think that's yet to come, right? And I think if you looked at the trending data, I don't think we're there yet. We entered a pandemic where certainly we're not going to change everybody's compensation out of the gate because there was nothing we could do to control that. I think the future, though, is that, working 100% remote does have a value proposition to a lot of people, could bring a lot of people back to the workforce. And so in that model, I think there will be adjustments that we'll see along the way for sure.
Absolutely. Michelle, thank you so much. I did have another question about security come up. So Dean, I'm going to go back to you on that one. It says, we have found that social engineering practices for bad actors have increased the additional spend on tools and not on people training. How do we address this?
There's a couple of things that come to mind there. One way to do it is to change your training program. This whole concept of having annual training, that doesn't work. That's people don't retain the training. It's not when they need it. The attackers know about those types of trainings. They come up with new attack methods. I mean, the training class from last year that we took didn't talk about fake COVID vaccination scams.
Right.
That was talking about, something else. So the attackers are jumping on, whatever's hot in the society at the moment. You name it, the ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal became clickbait, and all of a sudden, and they're quick. So we as educators and security people need to be aware of that and be quick also. And one way to do that is to have just-in-time training or just enough training for our people, so that by having a wide variety of simulated attacks amongst our organization, people get more knowledge about what the attackers are going to be doing. Mm-hmm. If we simulate attacks, a couple times a month on different people, and you see something about the Super Bowl or something about the stuck Suez Canal ship or by running different simulations against our people and then gently explaining to them how they got tricked, people are going to become more knowledgeable about it and become less susceptible to it, and be able to take that type of learning home and share that with their friends and family and use it in their own personal life. So there's a bunch of different tools available to do this. The Microsoft Office 365 suite has a nice package in it with dozens and dozens of different ways to do this and to track who's susceptible over and over again. We're all busy. There's a whole bunch of security professionals that have been clicked on things that they regretted.
Right.
It's not because people are stupid. It's not because they didn't pay attention to training. You can't punish people for doing it. That's really the wrong approach. It's continuing to educate people and helping them practice. I mean, the more people practice, the more experience you get seeing fake messages, the more likely you are to recognize them.
Very
and
true.
Then say, oh yeah, my colleagues at work, we had this type of thing, whether it's your income tax refund or signing up for your COVID vaccine. There's different things. I mean, there's some common things that are part of everything, hovering your mouse over the link. And, there's some technical things that can be done on the back end that the IT security folks need to make sure that they're doing to help keep the malicious mail out of our inbox in the first place. but the attackers are ingenious, they're well-funded, they're highly motivated. They go to their job to attack people just like we go to our job to do whatever it is that we do. And there's a bunch of people around the world that are getting paid steady paychecks and big bonuses for running these attacks. And, I think the bottom line is where I started is the old ways of training our teams are not adequate. And, having more hour-long lunch and learns type things isn't the right solution either. People need to be trained and educated when the event occurs. At that moment in time, it's like, ooh, now I see what I did wrong. And then you're going to remember it. And then the same thing happens, something similar happens again a month later. It's like, oh, that's different than the last time I got tricked. But now I know 2 ways to avoid getting tricked. And at the end of the year, you're going to know 10 or 15 or 20 ways. And the attackers are going to be going after somebody that is much less likely to click on their malicious link.
Absolutely. Dean, thank you. We did have a couple more comments come through, and they're really around the longtime work from homers, right? Who are, I'm so glad now that everybody's remote. It's really leveled the playing field. It's kind of evened that out, and it's made collaboration and meetings easier, right? Because it's not just me on camera. It's everybody on camera now. And then also one other comment about how done partial work for years and basically scheduled all activities around that. And the biggest thing that I have found worked poorly is the social engineering around remote work, which is what Michelle was just talking about, right? So making sure that we figure out that social contact and make sure that we stay connected and really focused on that culture that we're talking about. So you see everybody's faces back up on the screen. I want to thank the panelists and thank all of you for watching today. If Anywhere Operations is a strategic goal for our organization, and taking into consideration everything we've just talked about, it probably should be. I encourage you to check out the latest issue of the Tech Journal. It has tons of insight on the value of running anywhere and the solutions that we need to use to make this really happen. You can view the magazine for free. It's at insight.com/techjournal, but you're also going to find it in the comments, right? So we're going to put the link there so you can do that. And panel, thank you guys. This is such an important topic right now, and I cannot thank you enough for your expertise in this. And for those of you watching, you are welcome to connect with any of us on LinkedIn. If you have questions on Anywhere Operations, really about anything we talked about or anything we didn't talk about, you can just contact us. You can contact us directly or out on insight.com. We are available to answer anything or to help in whatever you might need. So thank you again for joining us today. We'll see you next time, and I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful rest of your week. Bye, everybody.